The first night in apartment 307, Tonye woke up to the sound of someone counting money in the dark. Not counting like a person in a hurry, counting slowly, patiently, coin by coin, the way his late grandmother used to count her market earnings under lamplight. Tonye was 8 years old, and he lay frozen under his blankets, listening to a sound that had no business existing in an empty room with the door locked from inside. By morning, he had convinced himself it was a dream. He did not tell his parents, not yet. Perebo had waited 11 years to give his family a home like this one, a 3-bedroom flat on the 3rd floor of a newly renovated block in Ajao Estate, Lagos, with tiled floors that gleamed and a balcony that caught the evening breeze from Lagos-Ibadan traffic below. He had grown up in a face me, I face you in Yenagua, 1 room, 6 people, and the smell of other families' soup drifting under the door. This apartment was proof that a boy from the creeks could build something. His wife, Morenike, a Yoruba woman with a laugh that filled rooms, had cried when she saw the space, already arranging in her mind where the freezer would go, where she'd hang her mother's woven wall cloth. They should have asked why the rent was so low. They should have asked why of the 12 flats in that building, only 307 had sat empty for almost 2 years. They found out on their 3rd day from a woman across the corridor. Her name was Ekaite Udo, a widow in her 60s who kept a small shop selling provisions from her balcony railing, sachet water, biscuits, matches. She watched Morenike hang curtains with the expression of someone watching a child play near a well. "You people bought that flat?" she asked, though everyone in the building already knew. "Rented," Morenike smiled. "Why? Is something wrong with it?" Ekaite's eyes moved to the door, then back to Morenike's face, and something in them closed like a shop shutting for the night. "Nothing," she said. "Just be careful with your children." She turned and went inside before Morenike could ask what that meant. That evening, Preye laughed it off over dinner. "Face me, I face you people," he said. "Every building has one mad woman who frightens tenants so the landlord will reduce her own rent." Morenike laughed too. Faith, their 16-year-old daughter, rolled her eyes at both of them and returned to her phone. Only Tonye stayed quiet, pushing rice around his plate, thinking about coins in the dark. By the 2nd week, small things began to accumulate, the kind of things a family notices only when they compare notes later, too late to matter. The bathroom light flickered every night at exactly 10 minutes past 11, never earlier, never later. Faith swore her bedroom door opened by itself while she slept, though she woke each time to find it closed again, as if it had never moved. And twice, Morenike found the kitchen window unlatched, though she was certain she had locked it herself. Preye dismissed each incident: old wiring, a draft, his wife's forgetfulness, which she resented being told about. But even he could not explain why every night, around midnight, a cold patch of air settled over the exact center of the parlor, as if someone unseen stood there, waiting to be noticed. It was the building's caretaker, an elderly man named Babasani, who gave them a piece of the truth, though not all of it. He had come to fix a dripping tap, and while he worked, Tonye sat nearby and asked him plainly, "Baba, who used to live here before us?" The old man's hands stopped. For a moment, only the drip of the tap answered. "A young family," he said finally. "Husband was Urobo, wife too. Onome and his husband. They had 1 small boy. Good people, quiet people." He tightened a bolt that did not need tightening. The woman disappeared one night. Nobody saw her leave the building. Nobody saw her come back. "Disappeared how?" Preye asked, now standing in the doorway, arms folded. "Husband said she went to visit her people in Warri and did not return his calls," Babasani said. "Police searched, family searched. She was never found." He looked at Tonye, not Preye, when he said the next part. After that, the husband could not sleep in this flat again. He packed his son and left in 1 week, never took half his things. Landlord has been struggling to fill this place since. "And you believe she just vanished?" Morenike asked, arriving behind her husband, arms crossed the way she did when she was frightened and did not want to show it. Babasani picked up his tools slowly and said, "I believe," he said, "that some rooms remember what happened inside them, and they do not let go easily." He left without charging them for the repair. That night, Tonye did not sleep. He lay awake watching the ceiling, and somewhere past midnight he heard it again. Not coins this time, but crying. Soft, muffled, a woman's crying, coming from inside the wall behind his bed, the wall that backed onto the parlor.
He should have screamed. He should have run to his parents' room. Instead, some old instinct, some inherited stubbornness from a grandmother he barely remembered, made him whisper into the dark, "Who are you?" The crying stopped instantly. Then, so quietly he almost doubted his own ears, a voice answered, "Help me find my way home." Before I tell you what happened next, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss more Nigerian folk tales like this one. Because what Tonye discovered in that wall 3 nights later shocked everyone in that building, including people who swore they didn't believe in spirits at all. Tonye told no one at first. What child tells his parents he spoke to a voice in the wall and expects to be believed rather than rushed to a pastor, a psychiatrist, or both? Instead, he began watching. He noticed the cold spot in the parlor always sat closest to the wall shared with the kitchen. He noticed the flickering bathroom light was on the same side of the flat. He began to see a pattern the adults, too busy with rent and school fees and Lagos traffic, had no time to see. On the 9th night, he did something braver than any 8-year-old should attempt alone. He knocked softly on the parlor wall 3 times and waited. 3 knocks answered back. This time, when he asked, "Who are you?" the answer came clearer, as if the voice had been gathering strength each night it was heard instead of ignored. "Onome, I never left this place. He never let me leave." Tonye finally told his mother everything the next morning, expecting to be scolded for lying. Instead, Morenike went very still, remembering the widow's warning, remembering the caretaker's face when he said some rooms do not let go. That weekend, while Faith was at a friend's house and Prayer was consulting a contractor cousin about checking the plumbing, the real reason became clear. Prayer had grown suspicious of something Babasani let slip, that the flat had undergone sudden renovation just before it was relisted, walls replastered, tiles replaced, all paid for quietly by the landlord himself, a man named Chief Bashe Adianju, who owned 3 buildings on that street and rarely visited any of them. When Prayer's cousin, a mason by trade, tapped along the kitchen wall, one section rang hollow where the rest rang solid. They broke through it on a Sunday afternoon, sunlight pouring through the balcony doors, Morenike praying under her breath the entire time, Tonye standing very still, watching, unafraid in a way that frightened his mother more than any spirit could. Behind the plaster, wrapped in a faded green wrapper, they found what remained of Onome. The building fell into chaos within hours. Police arrived, neighbors gathered in the corridor whispering theories that grew wilder with each retelling. Ekayate Oldo stood in her doorway, weeping, not from surprise, but from guilt. She admitted, when questioned, that she had heard fighting from that flat 2 years ago, a woman's raised voice, then silence, then Onome's husband leaving with the boy days later claiming his wife had traveled. She had suspected, she had said nothing. Fear, she confessed, had made her mouth heavier than her conscience. The husband, tracked down in Asaba where he had quietly remarried, was arrested within the week. Under questioning, the truth came apart like old rope. An argument over money he had secretly taken from Onome's trading contributions, a push that became something worse than either of them intended, a cover-up built from panic, then cemented, literally, by a landlord willing to look away in exchange for a hollow story about a wife who traveled and never returned, so long as his rent kept coming. But here is the twist that even Babasani had not known. Onome's spirit had not stayed to frighten anyone. She had stayed because her body had never received proper burial rites. No washing, no prayers, no return to her people in Wari, no closing of the account her ancestors had opened for her the day she was born. In Orobo tradition, as in so much of Nigeria, a life cut short and hidden away cannot rest. It lingers at the threshold between worlds, waiting for someone living to notice, to care, to finish what death had left undone. Tonye was not chosen because he was special. He was chosen because he was the only one in that building, young or old, willing to ask a question instead of running from an answer. Onome's remains were finally released to her family. Her mother, an old woman with hands that shook from grief long unspoken, arrived from Wari and wept over a coffin she had waited 2 years to bury. The rites were performed properly this time. The washing, the songs, the release. Neighbors who once avoided apartment 307 came to stand outside during the final ceremony, heads bowed, ashamed of how easily fear had let them ignore what should have been impossible to ignore. Praye's family did not stay in that flat. Some wounds, even healed ones, leave a room changed. But before they left, Tonye returned one last time, alone, and stood in the parlor where the cold spot used to gather every midnight. It was warm now, ordinary, just a room. "Thank you," a voice said, softer than before, already fading, already leaving. "You saw me when no one else would." Years later, when Tonye told this story himself, older now, no longer a frightened boy, but a man who understood exactly what he had witnessed, he always ended it the same way. Some silences protect the guilty, and some silences only wait for someone brave enough, or young enough, or stubborn enough to break them. Onome did not need a hero. She needed one honest question, asked by someone willing to listen to the answer.
If this story moved you, don't scroll past without subscribing, because there are more Nigerian folk tales like this one waiting. Stories about the things we bury, the silences we keep, and the courage it takes to finally ask the question everyone else was too afraid to ask.